It was a typical Thanksgiving gathering at my parents' house. The kind of event that should have been warm, filled with laughter and nostalgia. But nothing felt right about it. The air felt heavy, as if everyone was holding their breath, just waiting for something to break. And then, in one cruel moment, it did. I stood by the kitchen island, holding the tray of roasted turkey I had spent hours preparing. It was the one dish I always made sure to get perfect for the family dinner. It wasn't just about cooking, it was my way of saying, I'm still here. I still matter. And as I looked around the room, my eyes landed on my sister Amber. She was sitting at the table, her head held high, flashing that familiar smug smile. The thing about Amber was, she didn't need to say anything to make me feel small. Her presence alone was enough to send waves of insecurity crashing over me. I'd spent years living in her shadow. Her perfect grades, her spot as the favorite, and her ability to turn every family gathering into a celebration of her life. Meanwhile, I was always the one who stayed behind the scenes, doing the chores, the errands, the unnoticed work that kept the house running smoothly. The one who was never acknowledged, never praised. And that day, her words felt like a slap to the face. You really think you did something here, don't you? She said, voice dripping with condescension, loud enough for the whole table to hear. Look at you, always playing the martyr. You're just the one who cleans up the mess. But you'll never get any credit. You don't give, you just take. That's all you do. The room went silent. My father didn't even look up from his plate. My mother continued to cut her turkey, seemingly unaware of the storm brewing. My brother shifted uncomfortably, not daring to speak. And Amber. She just sat there sipping her wine with that smug grin still on her face. I didn't react. Couldn't. I had spent my whole life silently absorbing the slights, the insults, the disregard. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me break. But deep down something shifted. I couldn't pinpoint when it happened, but in that moment I felt it. The thing I had been denying myself for years. Anger, but not the kind that comes from a hot head. No, this was something cold, something deliberate. The silence stretched out as I set the tray down and walked out of the room. No shouting, no tears. Just a quiet exit. And when I stepped into the cold evening air, I realized I wasn't just walking away from the family dinner. I was walking away from the life I had built for them. The life that had always been about being invisible. For once, I didn't need to fix everything. For once, I was going to let them fall apart without me. Growing up in a family like mine, there were two things I learned early on. First, you were only valued for what you contributed. And second, if you weren't a star player, you didn't get the spotlight. Amber was the star. Always. I could still remember the feeling of walking through the front door of our childhood home. The smell of fresh-baked cookies in the air. The sound of Amber's laughter echoing from the living room as she spun around in her cheerleader uniform. Everything about her was loud, bright, and made to be noticed. And there I was, always fading into the background. Amber wasn't just the golden child. She was the center of the universe in our house. Every report card she brought home was a shiny trophy, framed and placed on the fridge for everyone to admire. Every school recital, every cheerleading competition, every achievement in her life was met with applause. My parents were her biggest fans, and I was the one doing the dishes, folding the laundry, cleaning up after their messes. It wasn't that I resented her. Not exactly. But resentment had a way of growing when you were always second to someone who never seemed to need your help. Someone who would always be better, more loved, and more noticed. Growing up, I didn't get the big bedroom with the fancy decorations or the attention at family gatherings. I didn't get to brag about my accomplishments because I didn't have any that would stand out. Instead, I quietly did what was needed. When Amber went to her sleepovers and her social events, I was at home, organizing things, running errands for my parents, helping them fix whatever was broken. No one ever praised me for it. Not even once. By the time I was in high school, I had learned how to blend in. I didn't stand out, I didn't stir the pot. I kept my head down, worked hard, and made sure no one had anything to criticize. My reward for being the responsible one. I got a seat at the table, but only if I was useful. I bought my first car with scholarship money and part-time wages. I made my own lunches, never asked for help. I just existed like a shadow, always in the background, never taking the stage. And then there was Amber, who didn't have to lift a finger. Her life was handed to her on a silver platter. When she wanted something, she asked, and it was given. When she needed help, people lined up to offer it. Her life was easy. She had it all. But in the back of my mind, I knew the truth. She didn't appreciate any of it. She didn't know what it was like to fight for something, to struggle, to work without a single person noticing. And then things changed. Slowly but steadily. When I graduated, I thought things might finally be different. I got a well-paying job, one that I had earned through hard work and sacrifices. But the moment I started making money, the family suddenly remembered that I existed. Suddenly they needed me. They needed my help, my support. Started small, just a little request here and there. Amber needed money for her last semester of college. Mom needed help with a new kitchen remodel. Dad had some unexpected dental bills. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself that I was just being a good daughter. But it wasn't temporary. It became permanent. I didn't mind at first. I was doing the right thing. I was helping my family. But as time passed, the gratitude wore thin, replaced by expectation. When I paid off Amber's student loan, she didn't say thank you. She just forwarded me the next bill, asking me to cover her new apartment deposit. When Mom's dream kitchen was finally finished, she told everyone, "We finally got it done." No mention of how I had drained my savings to make it happen. And my dad. He never asked me how I was doing. Not once. One day, after I had spent months quietly covering everyone's expenses, never being asked, always expected to help, Dad looked me straight in the eye and said, "That's what family does." No thank you. No, I appreciate it. Just the expectation that I would continue giving without a second thought. That was the breaking point. But I didn't break. I stayed silent just like I always had. But inside, I was beginning to see the truth. I wasn't part of a family. I was a resource. It was in that moment, after years of being the one who held everything together, that I realized something. I didn't want to be the glue anymore. The days after Thanksgiving passed in a haze. At first, I told myself it was just a phase, a flare-up of frustration. After all, I was used to bottling things up, to pushing aside my emotions so I could keep the peace. But this time felt different. The moment I walked out of that house, something inside me clicked. And it wasn't just anger. It was clarity. The first thing I did was cut contact. No text, no calls. For the first time in my life, I let the silence settle around me, and it was everything I needed. I let myself breathe. The weight that had always been on my shoulders, the weight of everyone's expectations, was finally gone. I was free, and I had no intentions of ever going back. But I didn't let my family off the hook that easily. They needed to feel the void I had left. And they would. They would feel it when the money stopped flowing, when the help stopped coming. I started by digging into everything. I had access to all the financial platforms they'd come to rely on. It was easy enough to freeze the tuition auto payments for Amber's college bills, to cancel the rent transfers to her new apartment, to disable the emergency credit card Mom always relied on, and even to stop the utility payments for the lake house, the one place that seemed to always get everyone's attention. The house. That place had always been a symbol of everything they didn't appreciate about me. To them, it was just another property. A weekend getaway. To me, it was a constant reminder of how much I had sacrificed to keep it afloat, to keep their lives stable. They never asked me if I was okay. They never even noticed that I was the one paying for everything. No thank yous. No acknowledgement. Just the same expectation month after month. And that was the last straw. I wasn't doing this to hurt them. I was doing this to free myself. I wasn't seeking revenge in the traditional sense. This wasn't about retaliation, it was about release. Release from the constant pressure, the endless demands, the unspoken understanding that I existed only to serve their needs. For a week I let it all play out. No calls, no messages. The silence was deafening, and for the first time I felt a sense of power. They were the ones who needed something from me. They were the ones who were going to feel the weight of their own reliance. By the 7th day, Amber finally reached out. At first it was casual. "Hey, weird question. Did something happen with the tuition account?" Then it shifted to panic. "The school says it didn't go through. I'm going to lose my spot. Can you check it?" I stared at my phone, emotionless. She had no idea what was coming. I didn't respond right away. I let the silence stretch out a little longer. But then I typed a single line. "Thought I never gave you anything." I hit send, then turned my phone off. It wasn't about being cruel. It was about making them realize something they had never understood. For years, I had been the one giving, the one holding everything together. But when I stepped back, they couldn't cope. They had no idea how to survive without me in the background, silently fixing things. The phone didn't stop ringing for the next few hours. Mom, Dad, Amber, even a few of her friends. They all wanted answers. They wanted me to fix things. But I wasn't there to fix anything anymore. The first few days after my silent withdrawal felt like watching a distant storm slowly approaching, each rumble of thunder a reminder that my family was unraveling without me. The silence stretched on longer than I expected. They hadn't called me back. At least not in the way I thought they would. There was no pleading, no real panic, just a lot of empty phone calls, desperate but in denial. Amber had been the first to reach out, but it wasn't long before the cracks started showing. Amber, always the confident one, the one who never had to deal with the real world, was starting to crack. She didn't realize it yet, but I had already caught on to her patterns. It wasn't just the tuition payment that she had forgotten. It wasn't just her rent or the endless bills she sent my way. It was something deeper. Amber had always been the type to live in a bubble, a world where everything was handed to her, a world where there were always people around to fix things for her. But the moment I pulled away, that bubble popped. I watched her patiently, quietly. From the moment I turned off my phone, I began tracking everything. Her finances, her school records, even her social media accounts. It didn't take long to piece together the mistakes she had been making, the little slip-ups that hinted at her false sense of security. The first sign came when she missed a deadline for one of her assignments. That wasn't unusual. Amber had always been careless, riding on the coattails of her charm. But this time the stakes were higher. She had begun relying on me to bail her out. She had assumed that just like every other time, I'd be there to fix it, to smooth things over. That's when I saw it, the fatal mistake. Amber had been borrowing money from a loan shark. She had gotten herself into debt, and when the first payment was missed, she started looking to me again. But instead of asking me directly, she thought she could manipulate the situation. She thought that by covering up the mess, no one would notice. But I had noticed. And this time I wasn't going to be her safety net. I pulled out every single transaction, every deposit and withdrawal. Amber's lifestyle was about to collapse under the weight of her lies. I could feel the tension building as I laid out every piece of evidence, each one a quiet step towards her downfall. And then I watched it all start to crumble. One night, as I was going over her financials, I saw something that set everything in motion. Amber had used my name to co-sign a loan she could never afford. She had hidden it well, even from our parents, but the amount she owed was astronomical. It wasn't just a simple mistake. It was a betrayal of everything I had quietly been doing for her. And now it was my turn to strike back. I knew it was time. I had gathered everything I needed. The information was all laid out. But it wasn't enough to just expose Amber. I had to make her feel the full weight of the consequences. The moment was approaching, and it had to be perfect. The trap I set wasn't obvious. It wasn't a blatant act of revenge. It wasn't something that would immediately blow up in her face. It was something more subtle. Something she wouldn't even see coming. I called a trusted lawyer, one who had worked with me in the past. He was discreet, professional, and efficient. His name was Daniel, and when I explained the situation to him, he didn't hesitate for a second. The plan was simple. I would put everything in writing, make sure that all of Amber's debts, including the loan, would come back to haunt her. But I wouldn't make a move until the right moment, until she was completely unaware. I made sure to contact the loan company and have them set a meeting. It had to look like an innocent arrangement, nothing too suspicious. The time was right, and soon I would be able to turn the tables in a way that she would never expect. Everything was in motion now, and I was ready. Amber's downfall was about to begin, and she wouldn't know what hit her. The tension was mounting. I could feel it building in the air, thick like a storm waiting to break. My phone buzzed, a message from my lawyer, Daniel. It was time. He had set everything up. The meeting with the loan company was confirmed, and Amber was about to be caught in her own lies. But the trap was still being laid out. I had to wait for her to walk into it. And as I sat there calmly waiting, the doorbell rang. It was Amber. She looked frantic, a storm of panic on her face. She had no idea that her world was about to come crashing down. I watched her, the storm inside her slowly building. She came in, barely saying a word, before she blurted out, "Elena, I don't know what to do. They're calling me. The loan people. They said if I don't pay up by tomorrow they'll..." I interrupted her, not with anger, but with a calm certainty that I had perfected over the years. "You're out of options, Amber," I said quietly, my voice calm but firm. "You should have asked for help before you dug this hole. Now you have to deal with the consequences." The silence stretched between us, and for the first time in a long while, I saw her panic. I knew then that the trap was set. Amber was trapped by her own arrogance, her own dependence on me. She had thought she could manipulate me like she always had. But not this time. Not anymore. As Amber stared at me, wide-eyed and trembling, she finally realized the truth. I had taken back control. I had set everything in motion, and there was no going back. Her entire world was about to change, and I was going to watch it all unfold. Amber's face was still frozen in disbelief, her mouth opening and closing as if she were struggling to find the right words. I watched her, detached, the silence hanging between us like a thick fog. For so long I had been the one to smooth things over, to fix the messes they created. But this time it wasn't going to be me running to the rescue. This time, Amber would face the consequences of her own actions. "You never thought I'd stop, did you?" I asked quietly, leaning back in my chair, the calmness in my voice belying the storm that was brewing inside me. Her eyes flickered, and for the first time, I saw something close to panic in them. Amber had always been the confident one, the one who could charm anyone into doing her bidding. But now the mask was slipping. She could see that I wasn't the same person anymore. It had changed. And it was her actions, her disregard for everything I had done for her, that had made me change. She took a step toward me, her voice breaking. "Please, Elena. I didn't mean for it to get this far. I didn't think." I cut her off, my voice sharp and unwavering. "That's always been your problem, Amber. You never think. You take, you manipulate, and you expect everyone else to clean up after you." She stood there, stunned, her face flushed with guilt and fear. But in that moment I felt no satisfaction. There was no joy in watching her squirm. This wasn't about payback. It was about liberation, freedom from a lifetime of being invisible, of being the one who was always there when they needed something but never once asked for anything in return. I let her stew in silence for a few more moments before I reached for my phone and pulled up the document I had prepared earlier. The loan agreement. Her signature was there, the proof of her lies, the web she had spun to entrap herself. I pushed the phone toward her, my finger tapping on the screen to highlight the relevant details. "Do you remember this, Amber? Do you remember when you lied and dragged me into your mess?" I asked, my voice a low murmur. "You thought you could just play me, but now you've lost." She looked at the phone, her expression faltering as the reality of her situation began to sink in. Her breathing became shallow, her hands trembling as she reached for the device. She glanced at the document, her face draining of color. This isn't possible," she stammered. You can't do this." "I already did," I replied, my voice calm. "You just didn't notice until now." I could see the weight of the realization hit her like a ton of bricks. The debts she had hidden, the lies she had told to everyone, it was all coming to light. And now she had no way out. I watched as she crumpled in on herself, her shoulders shaking with the weight of it all. But still, I felt no pleasure in her breakdown. The satisfaction I thought I'd feel was absent. This wasn't a victory. It was simply the end of a chapter, the closing of a door that had been left open for far too long. The next few days were a blur of phone calls, emails, and meetings. I didn't have to do much to make sure Amber faced the consequences. Everything had already been set in motion. The loan company had initiated the proceedings. The university was pulling her tuition. The debts she had accumulated were all coming home to roost. But it wasn't just Amber I had to deal with. The rest of my family, the ones who had spent years ignoring me, had started to panic as well. My phone rang constantly, filled with messages from my mom, my dad, and even distant relatives who suddenly cared about what was happening. But I didn't pick up. I didn't respond. I had made my decision. I was done being the fixer. I was done being the one who cleaned up their messes. One evening my phone rang again. It was from my dad. His voice was rough when he spoke, a strange mix of anger and desperation. "Where are you, Elena? What's going on? Why are you doing this? Your sister is falling apart. You have to fix this. This isn't funny anymore." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I already knew what was happening. I knew that without me, the house of cards they had built was crumbling. Amber was losing control of everything she had once taken for granted. And my parents, they were scrambling, trying to pick up the pieces, but they couldn't. They were used to me doing it for them. Now they had to face the reality of what happened when I wasn't there. It didn't take long for them to realize that I wasn't coming back. By the end of the week, Amber had lost her spot at the university. Her creditors were closing in. My parents couldn't even get the roof repaired on the lake house, the place that had once been the crown jewel of our family's image. They were left with nothing. No money, no stability, no easy way out. And still they hadn't apologized. Still they hadn't acknowledged how much I had given over the years. And that's when I realized something. This wasn't just about me. It wasn't about punishing them for what they had done. It was about me finally seeing my worth. Finally stepping into my power and taking control of my own life. I wasn't a martyr, I wasn't the fixer. And I wasn't the invisible one anymore. I had made the choice to walk away, to stop playing the role they had assigned me. And in doing so, I had freed myself. I didn't need their approval, their validation, or their gratitude. I had given them everything I had for years. Now it was time for me to give myself something in return: peace. The moment Amber and my parents realized that everything they had taken for granted was gone, that was when I felt a small but undeniable sense of relief. They weren't going to get out of this unscathed. But more importantly, neither was I. For the first time in my life, I was no longer the one carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. I had stopped being the one who was always expected to give. I had stopped being invisible. And the world around me, my world, was better for it. As the phone calls stopped coming in and the messages became more frantic, I sat back, relaxed, and finally let myself enjoy the quiet. The silence was no longer oppressive. It was liberating. The days after I walked away from the mess they had made were eerily quiet. There was no more drama, no more urgent phone calls begging me to come back and fix things. My family was unraveling without me, and I could feel the shift from the outside. It wasn't just their guilt weighing them down. It was their complete reliance on me, their realization that they could no longer take my presence for granted. Amber, for all her confidence, was sinking fast. I heard from Claire that she had withdrawn from 2 more classes and was starting to show up at the local coffee shop, panicked, texting anyone who would listen, asking for help. It wasn't just about the tuition anymore. She was spiraling, watching the life she had always taken for granted slip away. The worst part for her, she didn't know how to get out of it. She had no one to turn to. Meanwhile, my parents were scrambling too. The roof on the lake house had started to leak, and the bills for the utilities and mortgage piled up. But this time they couldn't lean on me. Not anymore. It was only a matter of time before they realized they had no choice but to face the consequences of their own actions. No longer could they ignore the years of unspoken favors I had done, the work I had put in to hold everything together. Now they had to take responsibility, and it hurt them in ways I had never anticipated. I didn't need to gloat. I didn't need to make them beg. They were doing it on their own. The phone calls that came in were desperate but filled with anger. My father was furious, my mother in tears. But none of it changed the facts. "I've given you everything," I said when I finally answered one of their calls. My dad was on the other end, shouting, trying to make me feel guilty. "This isn't how family acts," he said. "You always told me that's what family does," I replied, my voice calm. "You were right. That's what family does. But it works both ways, doesn't it? You can't just take from someone without ever giving anything in return." The silence on the other end of the line was palpable. For a long moment, I thought he might respond with something that could shift the balance. But he didn't. Instead, he hung up. That was the last time we spoke. I didn't need to keep proving my point. The truth was already out there, and the power had shifted. Amber's sudden financial downfall wasn't just a lesson for her. It was for everyone else in the family. They hadn't noticed me when I was the one holding them up, but they sure noticed when I stopped. Kept my distance. I didn't show up at their door. I didn't go back to the lake house to inspect the damage. I didn't ask about their lives. And for the first time I felt completely free. Then came the moment I had been waiting for, when everything would be final. I'd sold the lake house, the one place that had always been the symbol of my family's false love. The place that they had treated as their personal vacation home without ever recognizing the effort I had put in to keep it alive. The sale went smoothly, and by the time the new owner stepped through the door, my family was left with nothing but their own actions to blame. I didn't feel a rush of satisfaction. I didn't feel joy or triumph. I felt something different, relief. I had finally let go of the responsibility they had placed on me for so long. And now, they were facing the consequences of their entitlement. A few weeks later, Claire came to visit. She had always been the one who quietly supported me, and she had seen everything from the sidelines. When she arrived at my apartment, she brought homemade soup and a small envelope. Inside the envelope was a Polaroid picture of me and her, taken when we were both kids, sitting by the lake house dock. We were smiling, our legs dangling over the edge, with the sunlight filtering through the trees in the background. On the back of the photo, she had written, "You've always given more than they ever saw." I held the photo in my hands, my fingers tracing the edges. For the first time in weeks, I felt a pang of emotion that I couldn't quite place. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't anger. It was something deeper, something that was finally settling within me. I had given so much, and yet, it had always been unnoticed. But now I wasn't giving anymore. I had finally taken something for myself. "I'm proud of you," Claire said softly, sitting beside me. "You don't need them to see you. You're already enough." I didn't say anything at first. I just sat there staring at the photo. The quiet, sacred silence in my apartment felt different now. Calm, still and free. For the first time I felt truly seen. Then one day Amber sent me an email. It was short, simple and to the point. I don't expect a reply. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I get it now. I read the message twice, then deleted it. Not out of bitterness, but because I no longer needed her apology to feel okay. Already was. I had learned the hardest lesson of all, that success, peace, and fulfillment didn't come from constantly giving to others. Came from reclaiming yourself, from stepping away from toxic expectations, and from letting go of things and people who never truly appreciated you. I wasn't angry at them anymore. I wasn't holding on to old resentments. I was finally free. As I closed the door behind me, leaving the family I had once known behind, I realized something. The best revenge wasn't in the destruction of those who wronged me. It was in my ability to walk away, to step into my own life, to stop being the person everyone depended on without ever seeing my worth. And for the first time in my life I was okay with that. I didn't need them to understand. I didn't need their approval. I was done with the role they had cast me in. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living.